This is The Discourse with Dr. Ken.
Hello out there, is another Sunday. What one this time? But never mind. Like they say on the streets, we will go to ginger you with some subject today, some conversation that will energize your space. You are our listeners. We are happy you were with us last week. Last week we discussed the economy, the climate, the current economic climate. Dr. Biodi Showanjo did justice to that subject. You know what? Next week Sunday we are going to discuss sports business. Why do I say sports business? Some of you enjoyed the Champions League finals yesterday in Inter Milan versus City. Those of us who are on the other side of the divide don't call it Manchester City, we call it City. I'm sure you guys enjoyed it. We're going to bring you some expert, Abimbola Ilo, from the EPL, who will dissect, tell us how important these properties are. The Champions League, the FA Cup, the Premiership, the EPL. How has it become, especially the Premiership, how has it become the property that it is today? What is the business behind it? Why do we hear these billions behind it? And Man City won the Champions League. What was the opportunity cost in there? But today is going to be a different topic. You hang in there. Listen to us, hang in there. It's going to be a bumper. After the break, I will unveil the topic of the day. It's going to be a very good Jerry ride on a wet Sunday.
This is The Discourse with Dr. Ken.
Now the discourse. Welcome again to the Discourse with Dr. Ken. What is the discourse on Classic FM? I've been asked that question severally before last week's episode, and of course today on my way to the program to say, can you explain to us what is the difference really? The discourse on Classic FM with future conversations designed to aid your understanding of topical issues in a rapidly changing world. Our world is changing so rapidly. It will be discussions that will help you win now and in the future, because you need to win and stay on that lane. This future we are talking about is a big one. We are talking about a future that is racing at us faster than a tornado, in fact. So you have to join me and stay with me and get a grip of our program and get a grip of this future. Get an understanding. Like we say in marketing and in advertising, there's a difference between understanding and knowing. Today, we are going to discuss artificial intelligence, and Victor Famubode, alias Bishop, will throw a lot of light. Artificial intelligence is everything. He was asking me before I got into this, are we all going to die? The discourse today will illuminate on all that. So artificial intelligence, when we come back, I'll introduce Victor Famubode in a way you would appreciate.
This is The Discourse with Dr. Ken.
Yes, I like the fact that we entered the program with Lionel Richie. At the beginning, Lionel Richie was saying, you are the sun, you are the rain. You listeners, you are our sun, you are our rain. And we are with you here today. We're going to discuss artificial intelligence. Now, Victor Famubode, alias Bishop. By the way, before he introduces himself to the program, I'm going to ask him how did we arrive at the name Bishop? But I'm sure we'll have a lot of time to do that. This is a man whose understanding of the technology world has earned the nickname the Bishop by his colleagues. Let me take a bit of his profile. Victor Famubode is a digital policy expert focused on the governance of artificial intelligence, AI. He currently serves as a committee member for IEEE Global Initiative, the world's largest technical professional organization dedicated to advancing technology for the benefit of humanity. You're welcome to the program, Victor.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Ken.
Let me ask you, how did we come about Bishop?
It goes way back. I call myself an evangelist. So I used to evangelize on many things, on technology, on policy, and even on startups, right? What they need to do differently, back then. So, yeah, the name stuck.
That's fantastic. The reason, listeners, why you have to hang in there for the next 15 minutes thereabout is because what we are talking about, affects everybody. It affects countries, it affects continents, it affects businesses, small, big, multinationals, barbers, hairdressers, even those of us in the studio here. At some point, probably will have that interchange with artificial intelligence. Are you in the law field? Are you in the medical field? Are you a doctor? Are you an engineer? This is the time to actually think about artificial intelligence. This will be an interactive section. You can get us on WhatsApp on 090-921-72973. I'll take it again. 090-921-72973. And our handle is at Classic FM 93. 973 at Classic FM 973. Now, Victor Famubode is, I think, is the best resource that can throw light on artificial intelligence. I've given a bit of his profile. Victor advises industry leaders and policymakers on ways for dealing with algorithmic bias, privacy, alignment, explainability of artificial intelligence systems. So it doesn't matter which field you are playing in. It doesn't matter how you make a living or what space you are affecting now. The question is that when these interventions begin with artificial intelligence, how are we able to adjust to life? So when we come back, I'm going to bring Victor in, and we are going to go straight right into the subject. Victor, I'm sure you cannot wait to go.
Yeah, definitely.
This is The Discourse with Dr. Ken.
Welcome back, listeners. Now, Victor, let me take maybe we'll start from the beginning. What is artificial intelligence? And what is artificial intelligence in the context of, if you can break it down, let's take me to be a 9-year-old, but we'll still progress in the demographics. But so if you could just break it down in those simple terms, what is artificial intelligence?
All right, thank you again, Dr. Ken. So artificial intelligence, let me start. It's a combination, or will I say a constellation of various technologies, right? And these technologies, they are quite pervasive. So they actually interact across, different parts within society. And these technologies, some of them you call machine learning, you must have heard of it, deep learning, reinforcement learning, and a host of these, technologies. And what it basically means is you want to design an AI system, for instance, right? I would use AI going forward just to, give more understanding around it. So in designing it, what that means is you need to first consider data. And this data means that there are different kinds of data points that we all interact with within society. Different data. For instance, data around our gender, data around our age, different kinds of data. Now, you have this data and you feed this data into the system. Now, you don't just feed it, right? And it just gives you what you want. So there is also some techniques that you need to actually put into consideration. So some of these techniques is what you now develop into what you call a model. So this model is what gives insights and, reliability to an extent into what you are building in terms of the AI system. Now, when you do that and you have this model, the model actually gives you a certain kind of degree of outputs that you're looking for. So this output is what now fully, develops into what you call an AI, an artificial intelligence system.
Victor, before we talk about what it develops into, because I can see messages already pouring in. We're going to get to that because people were asking me, are we all going to die? When the men die, I mean the businesses or even the human existence. Some person was telling me just before I came into the studio that AI to him is like another nuclear war. So it's such a topic that not only scares but carries a lot of curiosity. So listeners, you can reach us on 090-921-72973. And our handle is at Classic FM 973. Now, Victor, let's get into it. Listen, is it a question of fear or curiosity or both of them? Are we all going to die?
Definitely not. We are not all going to die. And one thing, let me just break it down in terms of when you look at the areas around extinction, like people have actually referred to AI systems. So the first thing is the fact that people need to actually get more awareness about how this technology works. Right? It is humans that develop this technology. And that's the reality. So definitely what needs to happen is there needs to be a proper coordination around how these technologies are developed. right? There needs to be, a proper regulation on how they are developed. So we are not all going to die, but a key consideration would be that where you look at where, for instance, the conversation around, oh, if we are all going to die or not, you'll see that a lot of it, generates from science fiction, right? And you can't necessarily blame everyone because while growing up, a lot of us got, exposed to movies like Terminator and Skynet, Robocop, and the like. So we always had this belief around how these systems would, work and or how these machines will work. And you look at even the creation of these technologies themselves, they are produced from the inspiration of this science fiction, right? And it's fine for people to have this, concern around the risk being also in that direction. But I would tell everyone here that there's nothing, it won't happen in that way. But what needs to happen, like I said, is that companies, right, that actually create these technologies need to be more responsible now they create these technologies. And what I mean by that is saying when you're building this technology, you need to clearly consider all the risks, all the harms that these technologies can create. And some of those risks, there's quite a number of them.
We'll talk about risk down the line. But let's even start from a global space, global conversation. Because the more I hear you, the more I think about the impact on this on our economy, and I'm talking of global economy and then regional economy. When you talk of Africa, then in fact Nigeria. Have we started this conversation on at the African level, not to talk of Nigeria? Because our policy makers in Nigeria, last week we talked a lot, and in fact a lot of emphasis was laid on the need to quickly move from road well traveled. Whatever we've done probably the last 25 years in terms of building our economy, building our technology as enablers, it's road well traveled. And then maybe at best it could be road least traveled. What I hear you say is completely in the space of road never traveled for a lot of people and especially government. Is Africa having this conversation already? Is Nigeria keen into this conversation?
Yeah, I would say the conversation has started in this continent, right? But the problem is that the context in which these conversations are started or they are deepening is not as what you would want, these conversations to reach. So what I mean by that is, for instance, you have Rwanda. Rwanda just recently, published their AI policy. An artificial intelligence policy, which is actually commendable because it just gives like a direction in which they want companies, individuals to actually a direction on how and a guide on how they should be using these technologies, right? Nigeria, for instance, you have the NITS, that's the Nigeria Information Technology Development Agency. I know very soon they should actually also publish a national artificial intelligence policy, which I was part of the committee on experts, the experts group that actually helped with drafting it.
Okay.
But that hasn't been finalized, right? But I would assume that when the agency is ready, that would be published and when they go through the normal due process. But beyond that is the fact that a lot of these conversations, you just see it's just happening in silos, right? There is no proper understanding around what needs to be done in ensuring that you can govern these technologies at the global space, at the global stage, I mean. So you have Western developed economies that have already taken that huge step. So you have, for instance, the European Union, they have an EU AI Act, even though they are still also tinkering around what the implementation will be, which is supposed to start, I think, 2024 or 2025.
Okay.
But beyond that is the fact that you would see that the conversation is just kind of detached from this part. So this part, they are just using us largely as lab rats, right? One needs to, just as test environments for how, some of these technologies actually react. So I'll give you a classic example. And this is where, for instance, the gaps exist. A classic example, for instance, OpenAI. Even though I have a few friends there.
Can I, before you go to those classic examples,
yes,
because I can see some messages on the screen, I would just take one or two. Somebody has even rechristened me. Now he's saying Dr. Ike. I am Dr. Ken Ikbe, actually, not Ike. But that's by the way. You can always reach us on 09092 172 973. And the handle is at Classic FM 973. Now, this is a message from Tony Keja here. He's saying, good afternoon, Dr. Ken and the guests. On the AI, there is a trending video showing an expert displaying how through AI you can impose the picture of an individual on a different individual in a video form. How is this manipulation going to affect the human race in terms of identity theft and crimes?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And those are some of the things that, for instance, the group that I belong to, like you mentioned, we are also trying as much as possible to educate policymakers on more. So we have platforms that actually propagate the use of this kind of use cases, like you mentioned, having videos trying to misrepresent or, represent a particular object. The concern around that is, one, it is extremely manipulative, right? Because one, the individual that is in question, that the video is replicating, has not given consent into, that video being, used, right? And that becomes a real concern because you now have to start having questions around privacy, questions around disinformation, which are some of the risks that I was looking at, bringing into the fore. And privacy is actually a very big concern when you look at AI, because you even have different organizations that are really specific around privacy. So all of this, they are real concerns, but it takes beyond companies trying to self-regulate. How do I identify this kind of pictures or images or videos should I use? The kind of data that I'll be using to use for the replication, or I'll use to train my data and all of these things. It's beyond self-regulation. So there needs to be that proper regulation. And I'll say, naturally, for instance, data protection regulations that are already being created. So, Nigeria has one. Okay. I would say it's also a section of AI regulation, right? Because it definitely regulates the data on how you process, how you collect, and all of those things.
You can see it's of big interest because in you just speaking, I've heard you repeat the word regulation like 4 times. So that is going to be big, because it's like a machine driving on, and people are asking is that does it have a handbrake at all? Because with AI and all the fear that is surrounding the subject and the practice itself and the introduction, so we have to move with the handbrake on. By the way, there's a message from Dr. Tony Onyema. I'll take that message after the break. But before we go on break, let me say that I will take you back a bit, Victor. No problem. That is, how do you break down so that our listener come closer to this conversation? And what do I mean? How can AI, for example, create jobs and help a business and overall economy? So you just think about that. When we come back, you throw light on that. Listeners want to know, and this is what concerns them primarily. Then we'll go into the deeper subjects, especially the questions Dr. Tony Onyema had posed, which is before me here, but I keep that after the break. We'll go on break. Maybe I should take that question before we go on break. And Dr. Tony Onyema is saying, given the different political and cultural backgrounds of countries, do you think it will be easy to have a unified global artificial intelligence policy?
Okay, so the question, in terms of easy, no, it won't be easy, right? And he has already even answered the question and with respect to the political and cultural context. However, what can happen is there needs to be a globally acceptable principles, right, that govern the use of this technology. I know that there are already certain propositions that have been put in place to say, globally, let's establish like a global AI, agency that just solely comes up with different kind of regulations, right, globally acceptable, that can, help to manage how this technology is being used. For instance, you have what you call the UN. I know there was a moratorium that was done some years back around leather autonomous weapon systems, that it should be banned. Okay. So these are just systems where there shouldn't be the use of AI technologies or autonomous systems used within security. Okay. Right, or defense, that there should be a ban around those kind of technologies. I mean, there are some countries that signed off on it, but I'm not sure that has been implemented. So those are like, that's the challenge. You have some countries that will sign off on that. Some countries will say, no, you can't tell me how I manage my military, right? And that's where the real disparity could be. But nonetheless, there should still be like a, acceptable principle. So a perfect example for those acceptable principles should be, models, they are quite expensive when it comes to you deploying. And when I mean deploying, pushing it into production.
Yes.
But those models, when it comes to how expensive it could be, and they actually consume a lot of what you call carbon emission.
Okay.
You could also kind of regulate in principle.
That's an area of interest, and I'm going to take you on the carbon emission side of it.
Yes.
But I pull you back a bit again. This I think this particular question is of interest to a lot of our listeners, because I'm seeing the messages, and it's saying, because I know that associated with this will be a lot of job losses, but there's the job creation part of it, and where is the balance? So the question is, I'm saying is, how can AI help create jobs, and how can it help businesses in the overall context of economic development?
Yes, in terms of creating jobs, I mean, right now, what you have now, you have different kinds of use cases or domains in which AI is being used. So you have them in healthcare, for instance, to detect cancer. You have them being deployed in banks for things like automating certain redundant tasks, some tasks that are not, useful at that point in time, and help to just improve on productivity for these kind of organizations, right? But in terms of creating jobs, what needs to be put in place is the fact that right now you have different kinds of startups, right, that are actually just their business model is just focused around the use of AI, right? Which is fantastic. And those kind of startups, for instance, they can actually help with just creating new jobs, especially for people that have the skill sets that can work them. But beyond that, okay.
That's fantastic, Victor. At least it's not all doom and gloom.
It's not.
See that we're hearing about job creation, and we're talking about in geometric terms. So it's going to expand. We'll take a break. This is sounding more and more interesting. When we come back, don't worry, listeners. I'll bring Victor back home, and he will tell you more about your jobs and how safe you are in your surroundings and whatever you do.
This is The Discourse with Dr. Ken.
This one is of interest. Some messages coming in here. I said, of course, he's saying his own take is that technology is meant to make man's life easier, not make man lazy. Of course, it's supposed to accelerate things for us. But he added here that to say, I'm a screenwriter or scriptwriter or something. That means that I work in the movie industry. And right now, there are already artificial intelligence now that now write movie scripts. My question is, what now would happen to me and to my job and to those of my fellow creators and creatives in the creative industry?
Okay. So there are two things. First is the fact that it will get to a point where when you use these technologies and everybody knows that, okay, as a script writer, right, it was an AI that produced this. We humans, we still have that attachment towards ingenuity. Okay. Right, we want to be sure that it's the humans that actually created it in a way, in a form. So when you have everything all still done by machines, that can still create it will create a gap around what is true and what is not.
Okay.
Right, and that's where, for instance, the second part is where people like him needs to now properly harness the use of this technology to bring out the best. So when you have human and man and human and machine,
okay,
you definitely produce more quality, higher quality, right? So the use of this particular AI system can also help improve, the quality of work, and you still keep your job. But guess what? You will be doing better quality beyond what you already do, because you already have the domain expertise on it. So what you're just doing is just using technology to enhance what you already know, really.
Fantastic. It's good to hear that. It's more about enhancement. And not just the difficult part of it, which is associated with job losses and so on and so forth. Now, again, I'm going to take you to this question. It says, from all you have said, AI will help businesses expand and therefore impact on their profit levels. But how would listeners, manage risk management? I mean, and at what point do we ensure that we maximize this interaction between the human and the machine?
Okay. So for risk management, I would say the first thing is you definitely need to consult with experts when you're building this kind of technologies. When I mean consult with experts, you need to consult with experts that clearly understand how the risk management side around the use of these technologies, right? Either you're consulting with cyber security risk, guys, you are just engaging AI risk, specialists, where they clearly tell you some of the risk and harms that are associated with the use of this technology, and they can guide you on how you definitely manage or mitigate against this risk. Also is the fact that there's the communication of this risk that is also very important. It also means that you also need to consult these experts to help you, how you communicate this risk. I'll give you another very good example. So everybody consumes ChatGPT, I would assume, right? It's now become our next search engine. And the producers of ChatGPT, OpenAI, when you go on their site, they will tell you, oh, they'll tell you that the ChatGPT has tendencies of doing X and Y. That the sources of the sources of the content stops at 2021. It's all good. I mean, it's good, but that's not enough, granularity on what kind of risk, that particular ChatGPT possesses. Do you get what I mean? I know they've also released what you call a system card, which the system card is what, it actually has the content. What a system card is just the content on the challenges of the system itself. But beyond that is the fact that as an average user, you don't give a damn about what a system card is. Yes. You don't care. You understand? As an average user, I don't care. It's just people like me that want to, because of my skill sets, I want to read, what kind of challenges are they saying? What is the concern around this challenge? And all of those. It's just people like me, not average users. So there needs to be a proper communication around that risk. And that's why you need the experts in the room for you. Okay. Because when you are building these systems are extremely complex, and they are powerful. And what that means is you need to get people that understand the governance.
This is The Discourse with Dr. Ken.
I would say there should be a bit of caution on how, people have, especially experts, have gone around talking about extinction. I think it's highly speculative, because this technology is still also evolving, right? And I think when I came across the moratorium and the whole, paparazzi around the extinction, I noticed that a lot of top AI researchers, that people like myself actually used to read their works to clearly understand how this technology works. Some of them are actually also behind this extinction. However, you still have some AI researchers that don't believe this extinction thing, because they just think for them it dismisses the real concerns and risks that are associated with the use of this technology. And for me, I go with the other leaning that is saying that, this particular conversation around extinction is speculative. But what we need to concentrate on is the fact that what are those specific risks now that we are dealing with, right? Short to medium term. And those risks are those things that we need to clearly start developing a proper guardrails. And what I mean by guardrails is just effective administration on how these technologies or how this risk can be properly mitigated. So this risk, for instance, you have bias, you have privacy, you have disinformation, you have what you call risk that is now creeping into what you call these large language models like ChatGPT and generative AI. You have them hallucination. Right.
Victor, you're taking me to another level. By the way, there's a very funny question that has just come in. He's saying, is this bishop a Nigerian? Because he knows so much about artificial intelligence. Listen, I can attest to the fact that the man sitting in front of me is a Nigerian. In fact, he's a product of a Nigerian foremost university. And I'm talking of University of Lagos here before he went to solidify and upscale his knowledge and skill sets all around the world. So Victor is a digital policy expert. He's a Nigerian 100%. He's focused on the governance of artificial intelligence. He currently serves as a committee member for IEEE Global Initiative. And by the way, this is the world's largest technical professional organization dedicated to the advancement of technology for the benefit of humanity. So he's a Nigerian, and his cause is that of humanity. And all he's saying is how artificial intelligence will help our personal life and our business life accelerate. Now, there's a question. Before I take the question, I would like to give you back, listeners, our number, WhatsApp number, which is 090-921-72973, and the handle is at Classic FM 97.3. Now, the question I have just seen here, if you go back to the last one, I think it's this one, saying artificial intelligence AI can help states leapfrog economic development. How do you think Nigeria's subnationals can leverage the AI opportunities to bring development to their people? Are there states already in doing this, many states in Nigeria? And then what can other states learn from them? This is from Nelson Haneku from Lagos, Nigeria. Victor?
Okay. So I think first is, before we talk about leapfrog, we need to address the elephant in the room, which is policy.
Yeah.
There's no way you want to, harness the potentials of this technology without properly having to deal with policy. And policy here needs to address all those concerns, right? Those challenges like talent, challenges of infrastructure, challenges of regulation itself. All of these things need to be properly addressed before we can leapfrog. And yes, subnationals, that's state governments, can also try as much as possible to start thinking around policies that can help with increasing access or democratizing the benefits.
Okay.
And those are the things that governments, right, should now start thinking of properly. How do I ensure that I can, get more of my people trained, right, to actually have access to this technology and improve on their skill set so that they can create more opportunities within, the labor market? How do I ensure that I'm definitely, addressing and mitigating against the risk that actually exists as is today within, the use of these technologies? How do I educate people more, the citizenry, around the use of these technologies, right? So, and how do I ensure that I can partner with companies that can clearly help with improving or increasing investments in this landscape? So all of those questions and many more are things that needs to be properly addressed. Then we can now start talking about leapfrogging.
Okay. So first thing first, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, you're right. Before we accelerate and leapfrog, we have to understand and deal with issues of policy. If I hear what you're saying, so I go to AI bias, and I'm talking about making terrible mistakes, because these are machines. At some point, you could imagine that some terrible mistakes will be made due to wrong data feed and so on and so forth. Are there concerns around this?
Yeah, of course. There are concerns around AI bias. So I'll just break it down quickly into three.
Okay.
3 areas. They are still brother, right? But just for this session, I'll just break it down to three. So you have data, right? You have bias. So bias can actually, there are sources of bias. It can creep in through data or the model, or as a developer. So I'll just start with data. So data, there are different sources also on that data. So you would see that it could creep in historically.
Okay.
Right. And what I mean by historically, I'm talking about historical bias. And how that happens is the fact that you can go online, collect data, right, from the internet. And in the process of collecting that data, you are not aware that the data that you are collecting might actually have some historical bias to it.
Wow.
So a perfect case, for instance, is lending. I'll use lending. When you go online, when you do more investigation, you'll see that a lot of women do not have as much access to loans compared to men.
Why is that so?
So it also could be a case of the fact that
women might actually be more, laid back across collecting data loans.
Okay.
With respect to that they might actually think that I will prefer to save and invest, right? Or I'll prefer to save and
they're more averse to risk.
So, so you have those kind of historical bias that could exist that could actually be discriminatory against gender, for instance.
Okay.
So when you collect that data and you are making use of that data, if you do not have the knowledge around how that data works, then you will definitely create an output of bias in that particular AI system. So I'm just giving this use case. There's also a representative bias, which is also similar to historical.
Okay.
But I won't go into that. Then you have model bias. Model bias is, most times, it's actually the developer, right, that is creating these machines that actually have this concern. So when you are creating this model, if you do not have a very good understanding around how this model works, right, what you might have been creating is the fact that you are now generating the level of bias that should normally not exist within that model. Right. And how that happens is, for instance, there's what you call proxies, right?
Okay.
These proxies are, will I say, they are certain parameters, or will I say features that should not be included in your model.
Okay.
And by including them in your model, what that means is when the output comes out, you definitely have a biased system. Then you have developer bias, which is something I'd already touched on. They might have this confirmation bias that you see, this is how it is. However, that isn't how it is, right? Because you've not done a proper risk assessment around the use of this particular technology. Then you create systems that definitely now, are biased, right, towards certain people. And bias here is just, it could be discriminatory to an underrepresented group. It could be discriminatory to a person. Okay. It could be discriminatory to, even a group of people also, right? It could happen that it could even be discriminatory to an ethnic group.
Wow.
So yes, because it now depends on the historical way of how you've gone about, developing this AI system. So it's quite broad, but in context, let me just, keep it as short as that.
Oh, fantastic. I take you back because I hear you talk about policy and the importance of policy, as a foundational factor. So the question I ask is that at home here, and I mean in Nigeria, our policymakers, our lawmakers, are they knowledgeable enough to be able to understand what laws would be effective in making artificial intelligence not to work against?
This is The Discourse with Dr. Ken.
Globally, you still have policymakers that are struggling with it. Okay. Right, but you notice that few policymakers, and lawmakers, they are now gradually getting more interested. That's globally. Okay. So, for instance, the UK announced that there's going to be an AI regulation summit, a global AI regulation summit that's going to happen in the UK later this year. Okay. Right. And I'll say these are some of the opportunities that our lawmakers, for instance, our policymakers need to tap in. You need to send in your kind of experts. And I'm not saying as a template, but you need to send them in so that they can also kind of explain to the global audience the need for the global south here, which is this continent, to be well involved in AI regulation if you even want to establish it at the global level. Okay. Now, for our lawmakers, what needs to happen is that they need to become more aware, right, around this technology. They need to become more aware. They need to get more educated. So they need to call experts like, myself and others that can clearly explain to them how AI regulation works. It's not your regular, because the problem with AI regulation, because a lot of times people say, oh, you are regulating software. Isn't that a challenge? How is that? Isn't that ambiguous? So that the explanation around that ambiguity needs to be properly defined. And it's not just by your traditional way of lawmaking or policy making. It doesn't work that way. So that needs to happen. Right, that's awareness and education. It needs to happen. And what I would also say for citizens that are also trusting governments to deliver on this is the fact that we also need to understand that we need to constantly put them on their toes with respect to ensuring that we are not just creating regulation that is even increasing on arms to businesses and individuals. And for lawmakers, they need to adopt an agile governance model And what I mean by that is they need to be able to understand that it's fine to fail, but you need to fail fast. You need to fail fast because the speed and scale in which this technology is moving is faster than, is extremely fast. So you can't afford to say, okay, you just fail and you keep quiet. And 10 years down the line, you're so far behind. Right, even with your peers here in Africa, so you just can't afford it, and that's why there's the need to close those gaps as much as possible.
Yeah, because you when we talk about our lawmakers, I hear you talk about the electorate too. Because in the context of all this, I mean, if anybody listening out there would either be excited or downbeat, what do I mean? We've not been able to deal with the hygiene issues around us, basic issues, and here we are asking our lawmakers to begin to upscale knowledge levels, begin to upscale capacity in order to even begin to deal with the issue of understanding, talk of application of AI. Meaning that going forward, we have to really begin to think about our leadership recruitment systems, because when these people assemble and the criteria for which they assemble is not quite defined and followed, you find that you cannot ask too much out of them, because a man does not give what he doesn't have, does it? But there's a question here from Dr. Onyema. He's saying that how can we manage issues of intellectual property and plagiarism, particularly in academia and the creative industry? I knew this question will come, and I'm sure you're eager to take it. What do you think, Victor?
Well, the old conversation around IP, I would say that first is the creative sector need to kind of embrace this, right? Embrace the use of this technology. That's the first thing. I know it is eating everyone by surprise, but you just have to adopt this technology. However, there needs to be a proper, will I say, clamor for IP.
Okay.
Because I've seen situations where, in fact, there are some examples that I've seen where they just use, where some certain creatives, they've come out and say, you know what, if companies that actually create this technology do not have a signed agreement on our IP for the release of these models or the release of their AI systems and use our own data, then there's going to be serious liability issues, right? There's going to be litigation and all of this.
Okay.
And I agree with them because the reality is you cannot just say some people's hard-earned work over the years and then you just use them. Right. But I would say you just use them without, they getting involved in the process of how it's being used. But what I would say is this is still evolving in terms of the intersection between IP and AI, right? But one thing is they need to also be in the conversation themselves. That's the creatives. I like the question. It needs to also start understanding how these technologies are used. So you can also properly apply it in a responsible way, right? You don't want to create images, generate AI images of people that have not approved to, right? They've not approved to the fact that you can generate those images. I know people say, "Oh, but you have these images online," but it's not just that. This is work of certain artists, for instance. This is the work of photographers, for instance. Serious work. You can't just take it and say, okay, you want to use that to synthetically generate new images and all of this. So all those conversations need to be had, but it's a progressive conversation.
Fantastic. And I want to believe that the discourse itself is a progressive platform and a progressive opportunity for people, and our listeners are enjoying. I'll go on break now. After a very short break, Victor will come back, and I would like to take you on a couple of postings that I've seen all the way from the United States and the United Kingdom. Victor Famubode is Elias Bishop, is our guest today on the Discourse on 97.3 Classic FM. We're discussing artificial intelligence. We go on break and I'll come back to you.
This is The Discourse with Dr. Ken.
How can the policies being developed so far deter the greed of AI companies who will not want to be regulated or in fact circumvent the regulations?
Yeah, very, very fantastic question. So when you look at AI, especially it's used in high stake domains, and I mean high stake domains where the risk is very high, like healthcare. For companies that do not want to, that want to either circumvent the process or they don't want to fall in line. What needs to be done definitely is for every regulation of that nature, then should definitely be penalties. But the big issue here will be compliance.
Okay.
So you have enforcement agencies that will actually carry out this compliance. So there needs to be strict introduction of things like certifications and licensing. Right. So it needs to follow this. I always forget this Federal Drug Administration (FDA) style in the US, where there's a proper licensing process around how you go about introducing new technologies in the drug, pharmaceutical sector. So that kind of style needs to be adopted. However, in terms of regulating, right, or bringing out policies, I would prefer a decentralized approach than a centralized. And what I mean by that is decentralized, saying that the agency or agency of government that is responsible for regulating that particular sector, right, should be the one to take ownership. Right. Yes, you can have a central body of, maybe like the NITSTAR in Nigeria, where it definitely helps with the development of technology across board. But beyond that, because of the sensitivity of the sector like healthcare, NITSTAR does not have domain expertise in healthcare. So definitely you have the healthcare agencies to take up that responsibility of ensuring that there should be proper certification and licensing, right? And you should probably start thinking of things like, I would say, algorithmic auditing. It's quite broad,
Yes.
but it's just borrowed from normal auditing, where you audit systems, right? You audit systems for things like all these arms and all this risk and all of those. So those kind of FDA style that kind of style needs to be adopted in a way that it fits context, and we can definitely now start, seeing the beneficial, applications of AI in this kind of domains.
Okay, so the more I hear you, the more what I feel is more and more push away from the human involvement and interaction, and more involvement of machines and automations. But what will be the difference is that when the human is involved, there's a lot of empathy in there, and there's a lot of what we call human intelligence and feelings. But with machines, it is what it is. It's so accurate, and they come with such certainty and clarity. Yet, it doesn't come with any form of emotions, isn't it? But the question is there a possibility on AI gaining human nature at some point? And this empathy we'll talk about, that humans have.
Now, why I have to laugh is because this conversation is something I always debate with my peers, a lot of times. And the fact that I don't believe AI should be having emotions of humans, right?
Wow.
I believe that is pseudoscience.
Okay.
Pseudoscience, it's fake.
Wow.
Right? They've been talking about the fact that you have machines that develop emotions of humans all these years, and you've not had anything. Why? Because it is balderdash, is zero, is bleach, is not something that should be, ascribed to. However, we've seen cases of where there's certain attributes of humans that have been assigned to machines. So, I was trying to talk about what I call hallucination. And these are things that we should also be cautious about, right? And a lot of times when we are trying to automate certain tasks, for instance, if some of the companies that maybe kind of consult that kind of require my expertise, the first thing I always ask them is, in the design of this AI system, have you considered, or what is the role of human agency?
Okay.
Human autonomy of humans, or will I say intervention of humans in this system? When you don't have it, that's where the real concerns always be, because that's where you now have issues around control problem. And that's why a lot of people that are talking about extinction,
the real thoughts around extinction is coming from the control problem.
Okay.
Because you've automated a system, right, or a process, and you don't consider the human intervention, which they always say human in the loop. If that is not properly designed into that system, that's where the real concerns are. Because the machine, you would need someone that's definitely switch on and switches off. You need that across every kind of system. I know a lot don't want to agree to it, but it's the truth. Because we've seen how systems are failed because you don't have that proper human intervention to it. And companies don't always agree with it, but it's the truth.
So I mean, we can debate this. I mean, if I bring a counterpart opinion, you can see this can
Of
take
course.
30 minutes.
I'm always open to that.
Debate. Of course, at some point I'll bring Victor back. We have 5 minutes more to go, but how time flies when you're having fun. Victor, now it's a Sunday, quite all right. At some point, you give us your proverb. It's like, should I be an African or Nigerian proverb, just to mellow things down a bit? And of course, we take your song of the week. I mean, from whatever artist you choose. But what amount of skepticism is healthy in this contest and in this conversation? We need to ask that question to avoid throwing away the baby and the bathwater, because this is a very heavy conversation, artificial intelligence. So the question is, AI is very scary, yes. It is biased on instruction, yes. Instruction is fed into it, yes. But how do we ensure that our fear does not hold us back from enjoying the benefits?
Earlier, I talked about the fact that, one, companies need to be responsible. Companies and individuals need to be responsible. But that doesn't happen in a vacuum. So there needs to be a process, right? A process where you need to clearly identify what responsible is, right? And what responsible is just ensuring that you are balancing both the risk and the opportunities of the technology. So that's one. Two is the fact that you need, government to come in, right? And properly, it's not the way they regulate where everything is all banned. No, that approach of also still balancing the risk, right, and the opportunities. And thirdly, I would say that for individuals that are just scared about this technology, I would say, based on the words that I've shared today, you don't need to be scared.
Okay.
Right? A lot of people, in fact, you've already started integrating AI technologies even before the whole paparazzi around them. ChatGPT, perfect example. Your Netflix. When you go on Netflix, when you watch a certain movie, the movie, Netflix gradually they'll start suggesting. It's what you call a recommender engine.
Okay.
And it's a machine learning technique, right? Where you start recommending certain kind of, based on the data or the behavior of the consumer, you start recommending certain kind of content. Same thing to Facebook. You go on IG, and even though there are also concerns around how it could be invasive, right? Because, for instance, I could mistakenly say I go on YouTube, I type issues around suicide, I might be doing a search around suicide, and gradually start just bringing up content around how to commit suicide, and trying to elevate the conversation around suicide. And before I know it, if I'm someone that don't have a mind of my own, I can start thinking in that line. So we still have those dangers, right? But that's, I'll just say, not to worry, just use it responsibly.
That's very comforting, Victor. Very, very comforting. By the way, listeners, we are going to upload on our Facebook, so that because this is a very classic resource for keeps. AI is a conversation that will go on, and this is just the beginning of it. By the way, next week we are going to bring Bimbola Ilo. We are going to talk about the sports business in the context of X-raying the EPL, that's English Premier League, X-raying the FA Cup, the oldest competition of world football, and then the Champions League. What was behind the force around the Champions League? How did we come about the packaging? What is it worth? The business behind it, the numbers behind it. Abimbola Ilo is an international expert on sports business. I worked with the EPL in the UK and with other global sporting agencies. He has graciously accepted to come down to Nigeria to assist with this conversation for next week. So we look forward to having you next week. Now, Victor, it's that time. I am sure you are ready with your proverb for the week, what would that be?
So this is a Yoruba proverb. Kokoro tin jefo, idi efo, inu efo lowa. So all that means is the insect that is eating to the vegetable. Is inside the vegetable you would
find the real issue, the real problem. So it's still tied to
artificial intelligence.
where you want to solve the problems around.
You need to think. You need to look deeply into where the problem is emanating from.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, listeners. Thank you, Victor, for coming. There must be a 2.0 because this is such a wide subject. This is such a subject that concerns all of us. Now we take his preferred song for the day and then we close up. Have a good and blessed Sunday ahead of you, listeners. Bye.
And that's it on The Discourse with Dr. Ken.